Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast, and my name is Aaron, and with me as always is Dave and Fredo. Guys, how you doing today?
Hello. Doing good.
Doing well.
Dave's got his eggnog. I've got the opposite end of the spectrum with Guinness. Fredo, what are you rocking tonight?
Yeah, just some iced tea. Having some medical procedure in the morning.
I was going to say, what are you, religious or something?
I wish. Now, I got about 3 to 4 hours before I have to go, no water, no nothing, fasting before they ultrasound me. So,
Awesome. Hooray.
yeah, I know.
Well,
Getting old sucks. Don't do it.
I hope everything is fine. Yeah, getting old sucks. Yeah, I went to the eye doctor today, and they took my contacts out, and I was like, oh, I can't see anything. I'm like, they're gonna put me in a home anyway. So
That's me next week. I got to go next Wednesday, I think. I got to go to the eye doctor, my annual checkup. Trying to use insurance stuff at the end of the year.
So yeah, the Who Dat Jedi podcast will be on the road next week as we follow Fredo to his various medical appointments.
Get off my lawn!
Brought to you by AARP.
That's right.
Good news, everyone! I'm in terrible pain.
So anyway, well, let's talk Who Dat stuff just real quick here. So the Saints now have the longest streak in the NFL and the best defense. 2020 is the world upside down, isn't it? I mean, this is, yeah, wow. I mean, they, of course, being a Falcons game, anybody who was like, oh, the Saints trying to give away the Falcons game, it's like every Falcons game is like that.
If it's a division game, it's going to be close. Very, very rarely do intra-division games turn into blowouts in the NFC South.
But to sweep the Falcons, and that was awesome. And of course, we've clinched a playoff berth.
Yes,
So,
because the Lions did us a solid.
Yeah.
Somehow they beat the Bears.
We won't say anything to Scott Colesby about that. So yeah.
Oh, no, he'll say all this stuff. We don't need to say it.
And so yeah, no, the Saints are rocking and rolling. So that's pretty good.
And they get another rookie quarterback on Sunday.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts. That's one of it's like the Broncos game. You don't really want to lose to that guy.
Well, yeah, this is going to be another one of those games where he has his Hall of Fame, his Hall of Fame game.
No film. We have no film on him. It's completely random. Let's see what happens.
Anyway, all right. Well, so that's the Who Dat stuff out of the way. But keep going, Saints. However, I do have to say that I recently switched to AT&T TV, and they're having some kerfuffle with CBS right now. So we do not get CBS on, and the Chiefs game is on CBS. So in the next couple of weeks, if they don't get this figured out, Aaron's going to be figuring out how to hook up an antenna to his TV, or find the most sanitary place that nobody goes to watch the Saints game when we play the Chiefs. So,
well, hold your horses because that game might get flexed Sunday night.
That's true. But if it's still on CBS, then if it's Sunday night, then it'd be NBC.
NBC game.
Right on. Okay. But still, AT&T. Come on. Anyway, all right. So
get it together.
That's right. All right. So on to Star Wars, and as always, it is time for trivia, and it's to get our brain kind of wrapped around. It's our warm-up activity. Get it wrapped around Star Wars. This is the Trivial Pursuit DVD Star Wars Saga Edition. So if you're playing along at home, I just drew 3 cards out of the middle of the deck. And first one I look at, Dave, what is Luke's 2-word response when Leia wonders if Han, quote, cares about anything or anybody?
I care.
I care. That is it. That's like, that was such 7th grade, fighting over a girl. That was just, that was just kind of fun.
Very, very transparent.
Luke is not hiding his emotions in the moment.
All right. Well, 1 for 1. Fredo, where do Imperial scout ships Be careful, Aaron. Where do Imperial scout ships discover the remains of a rebel base?
Ooh, I'm gonna go and say Dantooine.
It is Dantooine. Or as Boba Fett would say it, how would you say Dantooine?
Dantooine.
I mean, we'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, so and now it is my turn. Who frightens off a mouse droid in the Death Star's hallway? Oh, come on. Chewbacca. It is Chewbacca. All right, we are 3 for 3 tonight. Hope you played along. We're going to have to find some tougher cards. Or when this pandemic is over, go back to Star Wars trivia at Reginelli's that time. Fredo and I just kind of mopped the floor with everybody. Actually, Britt was with us too, and I'll never forget, answered one question, and the people came up and said, "How did you know that?" It's like, yeah, it's amazing I'm married, right?
You need to check out my guest room.
That's right. Well, all right, cool. Well, we got a lot of news this week, so Fredo, throw it over to you. What's happening in Star Wars land?
Okay, so we'll go quick. A couple of these items are kind of easy. First one is Diego Luna was on Jimmy Kimmel's show last night, or a few nights ago actually. And he basically confirmed that filming on Cassian Andor has begun in London. He basically tells them, yeah, I'm in London making, quote, a short film with some friends, end quote. So good news there is they've started production. I don't think we'll see it in 2021. I would imagine we'll more likely see it in 2022 springtime. But it's good to know that the train started moving once again on all these productions. That it's not just we're rumor casting and hoping that we might get well enough going so we can do it at some point.
And Obi-Wan series starts in January. Starts filming.
Right. Yep, that's the rumor right now that they'll start after the holidays in London, also in Pinewood Studios.
The funniest thing about that was when they were talking about the Obi-Wan series, they said, well, they'll be filming in Boston. And it was Boston, England. It wasn't Boston, Massachusetts. And everybody would made all the hilarious.
Hey, you got to get this lightsaber. It's a wicked pisser.
All of a sudden, everybody started quoting Good Will Hunting and all the movies of Ben Affleck.
Yeah. So, that was a fun, 12 hours or so.
So remind me when we talk about, and I'll try to remember, but when we get down to talking about Grogu in this latest episode, and to just somebody say Obi-Wan, and I'll say it then, because I heard something that it's not a spoiler, but it's kind of a thought and a what if. So anyway, and I like throwing those out there. All right, cool. So
next bit of news, even though the first one hasn't come out, the first novel hasn't come out, they've officially announced at StarWars.com the next novel in the High Republic series. Now, this is the next adult novel, the one that will follow Light of the Jedi, which comes out in early next year.
Adult novel makes it sound dirty.
Yeah, I know. Adult reading level, let's put it this way, or grown-up reading level. It's supposed to be called Books and Custom. It's called Star Wars: The High Republic: The Rising Storm. It's being written by Cavan Scott.
Aaron is losing it right now.
He did it to himself. That's a self-inflicted burn.
Anything with rising in the title.
Well, after we talked about it being an adult novel, I mean,
it's not the Quiet Storm; it's the Rising Storm. The storm that rises.
Okay.
It sounds like a really bad German power metal song. Anyway.
Oh yeah.
So anyway,
you guys seen Onward?
This is how Dave is a really good parent. You can tell because he just totally steered that conversation to a different direction. That's why Dave's good parenting. All right, so Onward? No, I haven't.
Oh well, that title would sounds like it would fit in that movie. It's very D&D style of movie.
So just right quick, I'll read kind of what writer Cavan Scott says. It says, "Rising Storm sees the Nihil taking their reign of terror to the next level, building on their appearances in Light of the Jedi and beyond. Standing in their way this time are newly elevated Jedi Council members, Stellan Gios, along with Padawan Bell Setifar, so I guess these other characters will meet in Light of the Jedi, and an all-intriguing new character, a saber for hire, Ty Yorick, who I've had a blast creating. So it says Yorick is a force-sensitive monster hunter with a mysterious path. So that's interesting, a saber for hire. I don't think we've ever heard of that before.
Yeah.
So
I will say one of the things that drives me batty about Star Wars novels are the names. And it's one of the things I really appreciate what they've done with The Mandalorian. And maybe it's just because you are hearing the names rather than trying to phonetically, sound these things out and all the apostrophes that they put in and everything. But it's like, it seems like the names that we've gotten in The Mandalorian are very approachable and very, manageable. But when you're reading them, it's like, come on. And two consonants separated by an apostrophe, it's
or
like, help me out a little bit here. But anyway, so yeah, some of the names just drive me bonkers.
And it's interesting, the release date that they announced is July 6th of 2021. So it seems like they're going to try to follow much in the same way as they did with the Throne and any other Star Wars publishing. They'll have a sequel every 6 months or so, following on the previous book. And in the meantime, they'll pepper in young adult novels, comics, the whole nine. And they might even include, so moving on to the next story, an animated series. So let me see. This is from Cinelinx. They're talking about rumors that apparently there's a rumor that Lucasfilm is Disney are looking to develop 3 animated series. And one of them is a High Republic TV show. So High Republic animated TV series. There's no specific details. They don't know whether it'll include characters from the books or the comics, whether it'll be a whole new story. So part of the idea is they know they're going to have the Bad Batch, but they're looking to develop some new stuff, and they're figuring, we're going to have this High Republic stuff here. Let's start mining it for other projects.
I like it. It's a fun era. We haven't explored it before. There's a lot of stuff they can do with it. I'm excited to see it.
It'd be interesting, just wondering how, because all the animated stuff that we've seen so far has been within the timeline that we've been living. And so you can have some attachment to it, and it'll kind of have some relevance to what you know with Star Wars. I mean, Resistance was in between, it was right up against, Force Awakens, obviously the Clone Wars in between episode 2 and episode 3. To put something that is Star Wars totally outside of the timeline of what we've been living, because that's just talking animated, but even if you talk live action, The Mandalorian is still within this timeline that we've been living. So it'll be interesting to see if this becomes like Star Trek Deep Space Nine or something, you know what I mean? Where it's like, right. Oh, that's Star Wars, so it's a good thing that it's filled with Jedi.
Yeah, it's tied, but it's tangentially tied because it's more using the concepts and the ideas as opposed to characters and settings that we know. We'll have Coruscant, we'll have the Jedi Temple, Yoda will be there, but how much of that is at the foreground versus the background will be interesting to see. It's clear that they're looking at the High Republic not just as a publishing venture. They already came out with a VR game for it. They're going to come out with a VR game for it. And more likely, they're going to try to, not just animate it, but if it hits well, could potentially look to develop it into either a Disney Plus show or movie. So
cool.
So speaking of movies, and I'll just mention this briefly. A few weeks back, we mentioned the Star Wars Archives, the prequels book, the big old coffee table book that was coming out, written by author Paul Duncan, and he wrote it in collaboration with George Lucas. So some of the quotes now started kind of, as people get in the book and look at it, so a story kind of came out as to why Lucas decided to sell Star Wars. So I'll just kind of briefly go through some of his quotes. He says, at that time, so around 2010, 11, I was starting to make the next trilogy. I talked to the actors I was starting to gear up. But I was also about to have a daughter with my wife. And for those of you who recall, I believe George Lucas had married somewhere between 2005 and 2010. Somebody they'd known each other. Forget it. Let me see if the story has her name. Uh, so anyway, but he says it takes me 10 years to make a trilogy. So episodes 1 through 3 took me from 95 to 2005. I'd still be working on episode 9 right now. In 2012, I was 69. So the question was, am I going to keep doing this for the rest of my life, or do I want to go through this again? So finally, I decided I'd rather raise my daughter and enjoy life for a while. So he says, I could not have sold Lucasfilm, gotten somebody to run the productions, but that isn't retiring. He did that on Empire, he did that on Jedi, and he tried to stay out of the way, and he couldn't. He was there every day, and even though they'd be friends working on it, it looked great, he had to be involved because he's a micromanager and he can't help it. So he figured that the only way he could really separate himself from that potential to get involved again was to just sell it entirely, be rid of it, and that's kind of where the discussions with Disney came about.
I respect all of that. I think that was probably a good choice for him and where he's at in his life. We all have to make those decisions between family and work and in our day to day lives. But I can't help thinking that it was for the best. I know that we've gotten kind of a mixed bag with Disney so far, but how to put this delicately, when an heir inherits an empire, it doesn't always translate well with the next generation. They don't typically they don't have the same sort of instincts. They don't have the same understanding of the property. It's just always different. So for him to make the decision to sell to a company that knows what it's doing. I mean, Disney has been making family entertainment for forever now. So assuring in terms of assuring Star Wars a future, it probably was the best decision he could have made.
Yeah, it's kind of taking it to the sports world. It's like the coach that has been there forever. It's like when Nick Saban decides to leave Alabama, they're going to have to make sure that they have somebody that's going to. It can't be somebody that's as old as him, because there's not going to be. You need somebody who's going to have some, a new energy to it, but while holding on to tradition.
You can't be his kid. I mean, like,
right.
Specifically, like
Yeah.
you just that never works out. It just doesn't. Like sports. Going back to sports examples, Paul Brown's kid, Mike Brown. The Bengals have done nothing in 30 years since Paul Brown died.
Dave, what's the old quote in college basketball that you don't want to be the guy following the legend? You want to be the guy following the guy who followed the legend?
Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely true. But it's just these family sorts of handoffs. They just, especially in the creative industry, it just, I don't feel good about it, because you're like, going back to your coach analogy, it's like I'm going to zero in on a person, regardless of that person's connections to the previous coach, whether it's their kid or somebody else. I'm zeroing in on one person. You've limited your talent field from, endless possibilities down to one person. And it's not a smart way to do business. So, I mean, from that perspective, it's like, I like Star Wars. I like that we're getting lots of Star Wars content. I'd like to see more Star Wars into the future. I just think this is the best possible situation for Star Wars right now.
However, what's been created for Star Wars is like the Van Halen Hagar versus David Lee Roth fans. There are people who are all Van Hagar, and then there are other people who are like, no, Van Halen. So you have the George Lucas people who we may be straddling that a bit, And then there's those who are like, no, we need to get away from, the original trilogy and, sure, okay, George, you had your ideas. Now it's time to go elsewhere. So we are at an interesting path. And I think you're right, though. I think it was, it's sometimes it's time just to hand it off to somebody and see what they can do with it. So
And just to think, I mean, if you're looking to secure the long-term future of the franchise, selling it to Disney is probably the best choice you could have made because they're incentivized to continuously touch upon creative forces to come up with new material, to come out with new movies, new series, new games, new park rides, new everything. Because there's a financial investment behind Disney that says we need to get more product out. So there's, whereas if it had been, stayed within Lucasfilms and Lucas's hands, the moment he passes away, who knows what happens to the property? I mean, it could very well have become one of those things where it bounces from people's hands around the way, and who knows what we get.
Well, and Disney is obviously in for the long haul because they put 2 full-size Millennium Falcons in their parks, and you don't just re-theme that into, let's expand Toy Story Land, and this is Andy's Star Wars toys. It's like, no, that's not going to happen. So, they building those parks. That's they're kind of stuck. So,
well, and I think that he admits he thought he was going to be more involved in the sequel trilogy. Another one we mentioned a story about the book a few weeks ago. We made mention that he had submitted story where it was going to be Maul and Talon as the main antagonists in a sequel trilogy, and then basically Disney said, "Thank you, we got it," and they went their own separate way. But so in some ways, there's got to feel some kind of disappointment in his part. But that's also the reason why he sold it, because he's honest. If it's beginning made, he's going to want to be involved, and I think for his own health and for his family and for the peace of mind that he wanted to take and the other opportunities he mentions, he wanted to build a museum, he wanted to do a few other things. Now he's got the time to do all that and focus on his family instead of being stuck on a set or in the editing room for the next decade building stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's it for the news.
Well, cool. And sorry for my hacking back here. It's just post-dinner, yeah.
Good dinner. Good dinner.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Yeah, it's just, So it's just settling.
Someone done the wrong way.
So apologize for the coughing. But anyway, so all right. So let's move into the latest episode of The Mandalorian, and we're chapter 14, correct? And it is titled The Tragedy. And once again, Disney Plus does a great thing by not giving you they don't even give you the titles when you open up Disney Plus. You have to wait until you're, playing the episode. And then you go, oh, yay, look, it's Baby Yoda. And, oh, the tragedy. Ugh. I mean, I think that was literally, Britt and I sitting there and she went, oh, God, okay, this is going to be great. Of course, I was once again, 2 things popped up when I opened up Twitter. It was Boba Fett is trending with the tragedy. And I'm just like, God. All right. So now, from now on, Friday's going to be just a no Twitter day. So everybody's just going to have to, I'll be on Facebook if you want to talk to me on those days, because Twitter people can't help themselves.
I got up Friday morning and I went, oh wait, today's Mandalorian release day. I made sure to not touch my phone. I grabbed my iPad. I made some coffee. I grabbed some breakfast, sat on my couch, fired up Disney Plus and watched it. And because we knew it was only going to be 30, 35-minute total runtime, I was like, okay, well, I can do this before I get to work. And I watched it, and I'm like, I thank the stars that I did that, because no way I could have lasted. Because the moment I then went to Twitter, it was Boba Fett, Boba Fett.
Boba Fett. Boba Fett. Where?
Everywhere.
So, yeah. So, okay. So the recap, I'm not really going to do much of a recap because this is pretty much what happened. You have the Mandalorian and Grogu are flying into Tython, and they see the temple with the seeing stone, and they land, and he puts Grogu on the rock on the seeing stone, says, "Okay, do your thing," and then Slave One flies in, and oh my goodness, I might have giggled. I mean, because that was so I was fanboying out at that point because yeah, we saw Boba Fett in the first episodes. We knew he was coming. Tamura Morrison. We knew that was coming and everything. But I was always joking about Slave One's parked there somewhere. He's
Right.
what's gonna here it comes flying in, and I was just like, oh, that was so cool. Over the California desert. Anyway, so. Um, Meanwhile, Grogu is making some connection to the Force because he has a literal force field around him on the Seeing Stone, and that Din can't break through. But here comes Slave One flying in, so he's got to go take care of that. And so he gets into a short little gunfight with Boba Fett, and we find out that lo and behold, Fennec Shan is with him. So it was just lost her name.
Ming-Na Wen.
Yeah, Ming-Na Wen. Thank you. Yeah, so there she is, and it was Boba Fett saved her, so that was confirmed. All you guys who were saying the Spurs gave it away that it was Boba Fett coming to her, you're all right. You were all right. I was wrong. So okay. However, I was the one saying that she ain't dead, and she ain't dead. So anyway,
Points to Aaron.
So yeah, points on me. Anyway, so they are kind of, I guess, coming up with a deal to help one another out, and all of a sudden, these troop transports fly down, and a bunch of stormtroopers come in, and we've got the Battle of Gettysburg up whatever hill that was, and I was waiting for somebody to say that they had the high ground, but Boba Fett and Fennec Shan and Din, they did have the high ground. Anyway, but stormtroopers are coming up. They're coming to get the child, and then all of a sudden, well, what Boba Fett wanted his armor, back and we find out that he is indeed of Mandalorian descent because Jango was a foundling. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. And so Din says, all right, well, then the armor is yours. Of course, that's later. Sorry, I got to back up because what happens as Fennec and Din are fighting people off, all of a sudden Boba Fett in the armor, because he took the armor out of the Razor Crest, and in the armor he comes out and just uses every weapon attached to him and just starts beating stormtroopers and blowing up stormtroopers within an inch of their life. A whomping and a whooping. It was every fanboy's Boba Fett dream was this scene, I think. And so, but all of a sudden out of the skies comes a laser bolt, and the Razor Crest is obliterated in one shot. So all you people who spent $350 on the Razor Crest from Hasbro, I guess you can always recreate that scene in your backyard with a bunch of M80s or something. Just but anyway, so the Razor Crest is blown up, and Dark Troopers come down and take away. And actually, Moff Gideon does call them Dark Troopers. And so 4 Dark Troopers come down, and they scoop up the child who's done with his Force seance, whatever is going on, and take him up to an Imperial cruiser. And Boba Fett, Fennec Shan, they say, we're going to help you get the kid back. That's, part of the deal we made. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. And so they fly off to Navarro and go talk to Cara Dune, who is now a New Republic marshal. And Din wants her to look up where, what was his name? Bill Burr's character.
Oh, Mayfield.
Mayfield. Want to know where Mayfield was because he needs to spring him. So we're going to apparently be seeing Bill Burr maybe coming up later, but he needs, because he was ex-Imperial, so he probably knows how to break through their system. But anyway, So then we cut back to the Imperial cruiser, and inside a cell is Grogu, like just force womping stormtroopers all over his cell. And Moff Gideon comes in, and Baby Yoda, of course, using all the force and everything, just wipes himself out, and he needs to take a nap, whatever. And there's some taunting that happens from Moff Gideon, and basically the last thing he said, "Hey, tell Pershing that we've got our donor."
Donor.
So, and that's the episode in a nutshell. It's pretty much 30 minutes of Boba Fett womping.
And then they finish up by putting Baby Yoda or Grogu in the tiniest shackles imaginable.
Yeah. Baby handcuffs. Yes. So, we're talking, this is going to be the shortest episode. It felt longer than 32 minutes. And there was the only time we stopped to catch our breath was when Boba Fett gave the backstory of he and Jango. And otherwise it was just action. It was just a shootout from word one. And it was awesome. It was just, there wasn't a lot that moved the whole story forward except for the fact that Grogu got captured. But it was just great action. I don't know, just quick around the horn. What did you guys think? Did you expect what was coming, or did you like it? Oh, Dave?
This is my favorite episode out of any of the episodes that have aired thus far. And I think it's mostly because, well, a couple of things. The space western motif here is executed amazingly. This felt like it was straight out of a western, but it also felt like it was straight out of Star Wars. I mean, this is just in keeping with what this series has established itself as to this point, and it kept it up. And I loved that. I love the tension. And you'd mentioned the set piece of like kind of the Jedi Temple being on this rocky kind of setting. And he mentions it early on. They always do this there's foreshadowing early in the episode that's going to tell you how this episode's going to go. Oh, we can't land. I can't find a suitable landing spot. So we're going to have to land at the base of this peak. And they built the tension from that. They built all of the action set pieces from that. It's like, well, like you talked about, we have the high ground, we have to defend the high ground. And then towards the end, he has to sprint up the side of the mountain to try to get Grogu before the Dark Troopers can kidnap him. And we've been building up to this moment for basically the entire season, that they're going to try to get him back. And it was eventually going to happen, and then it happened, and it happened in a very tragic, pulse-pounding kind of way. And then Boba Fett being rescued from the dumpster, so to speak. And I don't know, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Boba Fett. So I won't say much more than that. But I loved those three elements. And you take them together. And like you said, there was no empty space in this episode. There was no filler. It was just from the beginning to end, there wasn't a wasted frame, and I loved every second of it.
Except for the one that had the helicopter in it.
It's not as bad as the one that had the half a dude behind the door, in front of the door.
That's true. Fredo, what'd you think?
It's interesting because I remember last week when I said, yeah, it's the shortest episode. Well, what if it's nothing but 30 minutes of action? And that's pretty much what they gave us. I was like, oh, okay. I enjoyed it. Like Dave, it's one of the top episodes for me because it highlights both what they can do with the show as well as the lack of restraints or mandates that Disney puts on Favreau and Filoni. I mean, most shows, even on streaming services, you got to be an hour long or 50 minutes. Dave Filoni and John Favreau gave Robert Rodriguez a 19-page script, which, for those of you who don't know, usually a page of a script is equals a minute of runtime. So he's like, well, wait a minute, you want me to make a 20-minute episode? It's like, no, we're expecting you to fill it out with action beats and moments. And he's like, okay, cool, I can do that. So that's what he did. So I love the fact that from the start there, I love that from the moment you see the title of the episode, the tragedy, you're like, things are going to get bad. It's just the way it's going to go. This is the episode where bad stuff happens. But it doesn't start off that way. It starts off very heartwarming. Grogu and Din kind of bonding. Okay, he jetpacks him to the top of the temple, and Grogu's having a fun time. And then, obviously, there's not an on switch that he can tell Grogu to touch. And then when he sees Slave One, he's like, okay, now we got to get out. And that's when Grogu connects with the force of the temple and begins having that force vision and can't be reached. I did love.
That's a very good tension builder as well.
Well,
like, highly effective. I mean, it's like, like you said, you can't turn it on and off. He can't control the timing of this thing, and all of a sudden, there are other players on the chessboard.
Yeah, very, very much like if you ever play video games, one of those defending missions where you got to defend somebody, which are always the worst. They're the most difficult. That was basically it. And I love that they also set up okay, you put down your jetpack, we'll put down our guns, because that leads back to
we'll get to that here in a little bit. I have questions about that. Yeah.
Right. No, without a doubt. But again, it's building up to why is it they can't just go get Baby Yoda before the Dark Troopers get him?
Yeah.
It's all in service of the story. This is the moment when the worst thing that can happen to Din and Grogu is going to happen, and that is they get forcibly separated by Moff Gideon. I love Tamora Morrison. I love Ming-Na Wen. I mean, she's been awesome for the last 30 years. That's not a hyperbole to say she was awesome in this. But I love the way that they presented the dynamic between Boba and Din. Because Boba is an elder, he's serious, but he is 100% Mandalorian in every way except the one that causes Din to pause and say about the armor. I love the fact that when he talks about getting his armor and Din thinks he's coming for his, meaning Din's, and Boba's like, I don't want your armor, I want my armor.
Yeah.
So, and then he goes and gets it, and of course, he becomes the ultimate McConkie and laying stormtroopers. I also will say right quick, I love the fact that they brought in the Phase 3 Dark Troopers. Somebody who played Dark Forces way back in 96, 97. It was awesome to see them live action and them keeping the style of them and whatnot. So it perfectly sets it up for the last 2 episodes of the series. So if you look at the whole arc of the show, this is the episode where things go bad, and now we got to go on a rescue mission.
So just in a nutshell, I'll just real quick, the things that, that first of all, I was pleasant. One of those episodes that just was it was just a pleasant surprise, and it was just fun. It really did feel like you were playing Star Wars in the backyard with, your friends, that kind of episode. But the thing that has struck me, I watched it a couple times since, the camera work in this episode is awesome. Like when, you see a shot of Boba Fett and they pan down and he's got the gaffy stick and he's dragging it on the ground, just like, like we've talked horror movie before. It's like, somebody dragging an axe and then he's just, busting up stormtroopers with it. The best shot was when he shoots the rocket and hits one of the transports, and the transport then crashes in the other one. And he just turns and looks into the camera, and there's an explosion over his left shoulder or whatever. It's just like that was. I don't care what you do, Rodriguez, but this shot has to be in. You have to frame this shot. I'm sure it was the one thing that was on the menu. But like I said, the cinematography was just awesome. It was just awesome. Pardon me again. So let's talk about Boba Fett. And first of all, we get confirmation that he is and Jango were, Mandalorian, because we find out Jango was a foundling. and I'm choking again here. But so there was a Clone Wars episode that everybody has been latching on to, where the Prime Minister of Mandalore was saying that Jango Fett was just a bounty hunter. He was not Mandalorian, and so everybody's like, oh, okay, they said it in canon that he's not Mandalorian. It's like, yeah, but the character's kind of a McClunky.
McClunky.
Is so it's like, okay, but you're going to take whatever words come out of somebody's mouth as that is then canon. So that's what people were running with, that Jango and Boba. We even mentioned on this podcast that, that's just was conventional wisdom, that Jango and Boba were not Mandalorian. Well, they are. What I don't know, what do you guys think of this backstory? And actually I do want to say that, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more here in a bit, but when he was mentioning Jango, my father before me, that tugged at me a little bit, because you're taken straight back to, Attack of the Clones, and that this little kid watched his dad get beheaded by a Jedi, so to hear him, refer to his father, that was kind of a tough moment. I don't know. What do you guys think about Boba Fett's backstory? Are you satisfied?
I enjoyed it so much. And I know that maybe to your point, some people thought, oh, well, it's slightly different than what we've been told before. But if the fundamental essence of the story hasn't changed, he was an outcast. He and his father were outcasts. And I think regardless of the status inherent in being a foundling, they did not feel welcome on Mandalore. And so that story hasn't changed. And the way that defines Boba is very affecting, because we'd gotten zero indication up until this point that he ever cared at all about any of that. That he cared about Mandalore, that he cared about Mandalorian culture, that
because we didn't know anything of that. Was in the movies for what, 2.5 minutes.
he was basically still a blank slate. Right. And there was we had gone back and forth a lot, I think, early on in this in our show here, talking about this series, about, well, what if it were about Boba Fett, or what if Boba Fett made an appearance? And we were always under kind of like the impression that it was a good thing that he wasn't there. And I think, like, when you establish Din as the main character, yeah, Boba would take some of the oxygen out of the room. And so it made sense for them not to introduce him until later on. Just because he has such a huge, fandom and huge following, and everyone loves him and everything, he would have distracted from the story. But at this point, Din has established himself. We have all attached ourselves to that character, and we all appreciate that character. And so, because of that, when Boba comes into this story, he becomes kind of a counterpoint to Din, in the same way that other Mandalorians are. Like Bo-Katan in the earlier episode, earlier this season, they become kind of a lens that you can examine this character through. And I found his story so tragic. We learn that he's a foundling. We see that he has suffered. He's been denied his true heritage. That he suffered in the pit, in the stomach of the Sarlacc. I think perhaps he's gained some perspective from all of that. But really, above and beyond all of that, like, here's a person who has a tragic backstory and has suffered. You begin to see his character shine through as well. And he agrees to a deal with Din in this story, and he sticks to it, and he lives up to it. And everything that he tells Din over the course of this episode is true. That is my armor. I have a right to that armor. Later on in the episode, I am going to help you help you protect this child in exchange for the armor. He takes an honorable approach to everything that he does in this. And so by doing that, he shows Din that you can kind of embrace the best characteristics of Mandalorians, like the honor and the bravery and this and that, without subscribing to a particular rigid set of rules for your oneself. He shows him a different way that you can be a Mandalorian.
So we'll come to a lot of that here in a little bit, because I'm going to challenge you on a few things, because after watching it, there's some things that make me, I don't disagree really with anything you said. It's just I'm always looking at it from a things aren't as always as they seem. That's what I'm warning. But Fredo, before we get but I do want to take something what Dave was saying, and then I'll throw it to Fredo here, because there was an awesome line that Boba Fett gives, because Din says, Fennec Shan, I thought you were dead. And Boba Fett says, sometimes fate steps in to rescue the wretched. And I mean, that line was so awesome, and it was so out of place, but, and to me, it was speaking to here, Boba Fett has become, really a polarizing figure in Star Wars fandom. It's like you have the people who think, oh my God, that's the most awesome character that's only been on screen for like 2.5 minutes. And then the other people on the other side are going, but the only thing is that he just looks cool. He doesn't do anything. And he's like knocked out in one swing of a gun, and he's eaten by so they're just, he's a punk, So we never get any of this story. I mean, so nobody ever is just kind of like, Boba Fett. But what this episode did, I think, it rescued the wretched, because it is like, all right, to all you people who said Boba Fett was just a punk, can't say that anymore. Not after, I mean, here's old Boba Fett, a womping and a whooping, and here, all those fancy guns y'all and all weapons on his armor that y'all made fun of because he's got all these, doodads. Here, we're going to show you what every single one of them does. I mean, they stepped in to rescue the wretched. They rescued this character, I think, in Star Wars lore. Fredo, what do you think? Is that overreaction Tuesday?
No, it isn't. On the contrary, I think you're closer to the truth than anything. I mean, let's be fair. Everybody knew about Boba Fett before Empire Strikes Back because of the holiday special. He was a special toy you had to do all the hard work to get in the mail to you ahead of. He didn't just exist on a shelf. And then he was in Empire, and he was such a key figure in what happens there to characters that we love, like Han and Leia. And then, of course, he was important enough to bring back in Jedi. So clearly, even though he had a small runtime, his presence was big.
But here's the other thing about that. You talk about the action figure you had to get. He was the coolest looking character on the screen, and he's the one that all of us. I mean, we all created our own Boba Fett backstory, because it was, like Dave said, such a blank slate. We knew nothing. And that's why I think maybe in Attack of the Clones, when people found that he was just kind of, a clone of Jango, is kind of like, it didn't fit with that paradigm, because everybody created their own Boba Fett paradigm. But I'll throw it back to you. But I think it was just what we saw was, like I said, all those things those stories that we created with our action figures way back when.
He was the man with no name. That's basically, he was Star Wars version of the Clint Eastwood character from the Man with No Name trilogy. He has a blank slate for a face. He has a very basic name that, Boba Fett. It could mean anything. It can come from anywhere. He's got that deep, growly voice before they put in Tamara Morrison's, back when it was Jeremy Bulloch. So he was very much, and even just that idea of just a simple man trying to make his way through the galaxy, that was his ethos. He had no code beyond doing what he needed to survive. So it's very easy to kind of latch on and build whatever story did. What I think this episode does for him is tremendous because not only, I mean, we got to see Boba a little bit in Attack of the Clones and then a little bit more in Clone Wars. So we got to know his character a bit better. But I think this is the most that we've ever gotten out of him. And just the idea we're able to make him fit now within the lore of Star Wars to say, okay, this is who he is tremendous. I also love, like Dave said, this whole season has been about juxtaposing Din's narrow-minded view of what is a Mandalorian against the entire breadth of alternatives that we've seen before, whether it's Bo-Katan and her Night Owls, whether it's Boba Fett right now, whether it's other coverts. He is getting exposed to more and more alternatives of what it means to be a Mandalorian than he did in season one.
Okay,
so I think that's going to come. That's the internal challenge that's going to create a dynamic for him to make some choices come, the end of the season and maybe season 3.
Okay, so this is where I'm going to step in with my next part of this because I was right 100% with Dave, and watching this going, wow, he's a man of honor. He's like, I gave you my word, blah, blah, blah. Watching it a couple more times, there's some things in there. There's some clues in there that it's not. I'm thinking of this song that I always sing on my back porch while I'm playing my guitar. It's like, he said, there's fellows who'll cut you for the coat off your back. Things aren't always, his dad saying, things aren't always as they seem. And so there's a couple of things that I noticed because it does seem like Boba Fett is like doing the honorable thing. I told you that we would, make sure that the child is safe. And so that's what we're going to do. Yeah, but that wasn't the deal. The deal was you give me my armor and we won't kill the child right now. That was the deal. And so it wasn't until after Boba Fett goes up and he sees the Imperial cruiser and he says, they're back.
They're back.
And that hits him. And so then all of a sudden it's like, and this is when watch this. And this, cause Ming-Na Wen, he says, no, we're not quite done yet because Din said that's the deal. So, okay, see you later. Said, no, we're not quite done yet. And Ming-Na Wen gives this look like, dang it, Din, what is it? What are they saying? Din Farik or whatever. She's got she gives this look that it's kind of like when Han Solo, in Force Awakens, when, Rey's talking and he has this look on his face like he knows more about what's going on than. Yeah, it's just this cutaway to Ming-Na Wen that makes it look like she's like, it's a bad idea. I think Boba Fett has his own motives, and it's not just because he's a Boy Scout and Mandalorian armor, and he doesn't give root and toot about the kid because he was going to gun it down, if he didn't get his armor back. He has some score to settle with the Empire. And he's going to use Din. So we're saying that he's seeing, an example of how you can be a Mandalorian. Yeah, you're right. That's one way of how to be a Mandalorian. I don't know. Did you guys notice any of those things? It's like, is he a man of, what's his play? Is it man of honor or is it scum and villainy?
It's possible. I mean, like, again, I wouldn't rule any of that out, but I think the point becomes he's not one note.
Well, I think from a storytelling perspective, and from if I'm Favreau and Filoni, it's like you're hooking us by going, look, he's a bad and he's a man of his word, and everybody's like, oh, swoon, Boba Fett, yes, I'm with him, and then it's going to be WWE, and he's going to turn heel in the last episode. And that's where you turn the emotion, you get your viewership, that emotion, those emotions going. I don't know. That's just, I'm sorry, I'll let you talk.
You could very well end up in that place, and I wouldn't be mad about it. And I really, again, I'm not sitting here saying that, I understand every, piece of his character, but we've gotten so much more than we ever had before. And I think like that's the thing. You're talking about rescuing this character. And um it wasn't just watching him wreck shop, though that was great. Like wow, he still is this amazing fighter and he can still do all these amazing things and oh, he's so cool. Yeah, he's cool again. Um no, I mean, to me, the best parts of this were those conversations and trying to find hidden layers potentially, but also just, wow, we're getting some of that backstory filled in. We're learning who he is, and we're learning how that relates to Din.
Well,
And all of that is just marvelous. If he heel turns, great,
and I think you're both right that, I mean, it is, he is, we've talked about this on the show. He is learning about, that basically that his narrow minded way of this is the way isn't just the way, because, Boba Fett says, I give my allegiance to no one. And because he said, then you're Mandalorian, he just said, I give my allegiance to no one. He was very adamant about that. So it's like,
the line I thought of when I was thinking about this episode was, instead of "this is the way," "these are the ways." I think like that's kind of where we're headed with this, and I'd be really curious to see if we get more examples for him to bounce off of. Are we going to get a Sabine? Are we going to get some other Mandalorian characters who he can see again? Well, this is an option. This is an option for me to go this other route.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, just real quick, put it this way. You could be 100% right. I mean, for all we know, Boba Fett took the job to go find, because how did he find Mando? I mean, we know he's a really good tracker and whatnot, but he was able to find where he was going before Gideon's forces showed up, and Gideon's forces had a tracker on their ship.
See, and if it wasn't for the fact that he flew up there and said, it's them, I would have thought that he was working with the Empire, because, he makes, no, not until you take off that jetpack, basically putting Din at the bottom of the hill so he can't fly up to save the child. That's why there's almost part of me that's wondering, is he working with the Empire and he's selling this, oh my goodness, the Empire's back. Oh heavens to Murgatroyd, if he's just selling a bill of goods.
Well, my question is, he doesn't necessarily have to be working for the Empire themselves. There could be other clients out there who he may be working for, and they may not be necessarily after the child. See, that's the other thing. Again, we've stated this now in the last several weeks. We've made a big deal about Mandalorian armor, about the value of Beskar. Maybe there's somebody out there for hunting for Din, and Boba's best course of action right now is to keep Din close to him and looking to betray him later on. I don't know. I mean, given the nature of his character, any alternative is possible. The honorable path, the dishonorable path, the traitorous path. That's part of the beauty of his character, is when he says, I'll give my allegiance to no one, he actually means it. All contracts are of a momentary nature until I get paid. Once I get paid, I'm at the door and I don't care. In many ways, Boba is what Din could have been had he not found the child.
Well, this is a trope that you see all the time in comic books, where it's like the main villain is basically a reflection of the hero. And in that regard, Boba Fett, it would be a much greater, better opponent for Din than Moff Gideon or anyone else, because they are the same in a lot of respects, foundlings, trying to wrestle with their relationship with being a Mandalorian and what that means. Approaching this idea, this gig of being a bounty hunter in a different way from one another. Again, and if there's a heel turn, that whole sense of honor becomes a major plot element at that point, and a major bone of contention between the two.
Right.
And I guess I'm just such a cynic, but I do think it's like, there's when I see that, it's like, yeah, wow, this is, you know, he man, that guy's awesome and he's honorable and he's this, that, and then it's like something just smells off, and of course we can't discount this is still the guy who, did what he did in Empire Strikes Back and was going to kill all of our favorite people in Return of the Jedi if he wasn't knocked into the Sarlacc. So um, I was actually kind of actually anticipating a line when he, I thought it was interesting that Din said, "Are you a Jedi?" And I was actually kind of waiting for a line from Boba Fett because, he probably isn't too fond of Jedi. I mean, not too fond of Jedi at all. But speaking of Jedi, I'm gonna skip our next bullet point. We'll come back to that maybe later. But I want to go on to Grogu because while all this is going on with Boba Fett, Grogu is having some Force seance. First of all, there's a little Lord of the Ringish, when he's up there and a butterfly comes down, and it's also just a kid, going, "Oh, look, a butterfly," when he's supposed to be, doing his thing. We'll talk about that kid thing here in a little bit too. But first of all, so Grogu does get into he's communing somehow with the Force. I don't know. What do you guys think? Who do you think he's talking to? Who picked up the phone? And by the way, did you notice, I'll just throw this out as you guys are both kind of going, I don't know, and shaking your head. If you watch one of the frames, when Din's at the bottom of the hill and you look up and you see, the blue light come up, there are two figures in around that, like one supposedly, is Grogu and the other, there's another figure there. It's just a figure. You can't make anything out, but, I'll let you guys go around and say what you think. Then I'm gonna throw my National Enquirer, straight out of my caboose, theory. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say right quick because I didn't think it was a phone as much as it was a bullhorn, which in other words, I don't think it was a message directly to anybody. I think he was Grogu in that moment just projecting himself out into the galaxy, which could mean anybody could pick up. I'll be honest, I didn't see the figure the first time I saw the episode because it's just a moment. It could be anybody. I mean, part of me is thinking it's going to be somebody we have not met because in some ways that's kind of easier to fill in as opposed to. I mean, the other theory I always held is that the final shot of this season is going to be Ezra and Sabine.
All right. So then I'm gonna here comes National Enquirer.
Go.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. Ewan McGregor. Force Ewan McGregor. Because back when, Ewan's giving his, press junket about something, they asked him, and he's like, yeah, and I tried on my robes and they just happened to be filming The Mandalorian. So they had me test it out in the volume and stuff like this. I'm starting to kind of cry some BS there, that I'm wondering if it's you could have a Ewan McGregor because it doesn't have to be Alec Guinness because Grogu didn't know,
Alec Guinness.
But maybe Grogu did know Obi-Wan Kenobi. And what if Obi-Wan is one of his former masters that trained him somehow, not saying master Padawan, but so you could have a Ewan McGregor talking to Grogu at some point, and because that just seems just odd. Like if you're going to try on the Obi-Wan Kenobi robe, you're not going to go where they're filming The Mandalorian, where they just happen to have Jedi robes. They're not filming that in, Lucasfilm Studios. They're filming it in a rail yard in Los Angeles. So, it's like, I don't know. I'm just saying it seems, I'm saying Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'll put $5 on it. I don't have any spoiler information on that. I'm just saying, reading between the lines, and it would make total sense.
It would make sense from a storytelling perspective if you think of Grogu's communication as being an attempt to reach out to a specific person. because he doesn't have any people to reach out to. If you think about any of the Jedi that he might have interacted with during when he was a youngling, they're all dead. Obi-Wan's dead, Yoda's dead, Anakin's dead.
Dean Wormer's dead.
Doom is dead.
Yeah.
I just raised my hand on Google Meet.
Yeah.
Because here's the other thing. Ahsoka says someone got him out of the temple.
Yeah.
What if, as Yoda and Obi-Wan, as they're after Order 66, maybe there's a little bit of a flashback of we found the little baby Grogu hiding, in the kitchenette, and so took him off somewhere, and maybe gave him to, somebody said, get him out of here, so maybe it was, I mean, there are so many things that you could, that it would make total sense, because we're all sitting here going, well, how did he get out of the temple?
Right.
Well, who were the only Jedi that were really in the temple? It was Yoda, and it was, or maybe it was Yoda saying, hey, wait, we got to go get my kid. But no, it kind of makes sense. I mean, he doesn't have to have been, Obi-Wan's Padawan, but it was just maybe Obi-Wan taught some class that the kids just, had to take, and Grogu liked him, had a connection with him or something. So
the problem that I see with this potential outcome is he would have a hard time writing it into the series in a way that it would make sense to Din. Well, he was talking to people in the afterlife.
Oh, but
clearly that's a thing that you can do.
All that Ahsoka said was that, is basically Grogu will choose what he wants to do. So this could be just a Grogu moment, and he makes the decision, no, I don't want to train as a Jedi, because maybe it was, Obi-Wan saying to him, you do what you got to do. You don't have to be a Jedi, and it's okay, to have a connection with somebody. Maybe that's just, okay, I'm giving you this last bit of knowledge. Now I got to go off over do this thing.
That said, if he was getting that advice, he didn't follow it very well later in the episode.
Well, okay, so
throwing troopers around in the cell.
I want to talk about that right now, because I found it interesting the first time I watched it. And then again, I was watching it today. In the opening scene where Grogu's in the cockpit playing with the little ball, and each time, because Din says the word Jedi twice, and each time that he says Jedi, Grogu just grunts, just kind of goes, meh. He says, don't you want to do that Jedi stuff? Meh. Are you going to go with a Jedi? Meh. I mean, he has a guttural reaction to the Jedi. So now, go to the end of the episode, and first of all, he's not just some little Padawan learner, because he's like you said, throwing troopers around. We've seen him force choke Cara Dune before. We've seen him hold back flames. We've seen him take down a mudhorn. All these things. He's more of a Jedi, or he's not a Jedi. He's got a lot of dark side tendencies. And I don't think he cares about the Jedi all that much. And those two, I find it a very interesting choice, that if it was just once, I would have kind of let it go. But it's twice that after he says Jedi.
It makes me wonder if Grogu is equating Jedi with not Din. Because again,
could be.
Ahsoka's very much equating, spoke to the strong bond that's formed between them, meaning Din and Bay and Grogu. Baby Yoda habits going to be hard to kick. Anyway, so it's going to be an interesting question for that character as well. Does he want to go with the Jedi? If somebody, whether it's forced Obi-Wan, or if it's Ezra, or if it's Luke Skywalker coming along to come grab him, or whoever turns up and says, "Come with me." Does he want to do that? Because part of me says he's not going to want to do that.
And you could
Force
be
powers or no force powers.
you could be absolutely correct that it's just like, no, I want to hang out with you. And so every time you say Jedi, it's like you got to practice your violin, you know.
Right.
But I'm you couple that though with his, I mean, it's not like, again, it's not Harry Potter mad at, you know, Dudley Dursley and then accidentally sets a snake on him. You know, it's purposefully choking someone. It's purposefully throwing them around the cells. It's purposefully, you know, doing these things. So if he was trained, you know, he was not on the straight and narrow. Or
Right.
he's just got a lot of baggage right now that he's just dealing with, which that could be as well.
No, I was just going to say real quick. And again, that's one of the issues we really haven't tackled in the series. It's so far, I mean, because he's been quote unquote Baby Yoda, as I make air quotes on a audio medium, uh, we have been kind of mostly thinking of him as a child, as the child, therefore not capable of making choices, decisions, not having much awareness of what's happening around him, more reacting than acting. And I think the fact that Ahsoka dropped on us that he has been trained on Coruscant, that he had many Jedi Masters, you know, well, now we're hearing him, you know, you're hearing him making conscious decisions, you know, whether positive or negative, whether he wants to or not. And that's,
Well, and here's the thing is
it's a
that,
new dynamic for him.
well, and do the math that if he was, he could have been trained at the temple for a good 15 some odd years. How we don't
Right.
know how old Baby Yoda is taken from his family to go to the temple, but we do know that, you know, humans are, it's pretty much as a baby, you know, they identify him and they take him, and it's like, because Anakin at 9 was too old, you know.
Right.
And so what I'm saying, so he could have been, it's not like he just, you know, had 1 or 2 semesters of, you know, basic Jedi train. It 15 years, you know, could be, you know, or, you know, even more, you know, because he's 50 now. It's been 25-ish since the fall of, you know, the Republic. So, I mean, that gives him a lot of time that he could be, you know, trained in the Force.
I enjoy speculating like this, but I also feel like I don't agree with this particular possibility because of what we've talked about on the show before, which is like this
Can't make him
idea where
Damien.
no, when you
Yeah.
when you paint yourself into a corner,
Oh, okay.
and we've talked about that several times, where it's like you within the storytelling, you make decisions and you make choices, and that leads to another choice, and eventually you get to a position where you can't make certain choices anymore because of what you've done previously. And I feel like we're at that stage with Baby Yoda as a phenomenon. You turn that character evil, and I just think you're going to have people revolting in the streets. People are too attached to that character, and I really wouldn't see them making that choice for that reason alone.
But these are the same
You know,
guys who put a salacious crumb on a stick while a live one was watching it cook. I'm just saying that they have kind of a dark sense of humor. That so, but you're right though. You're absolutely right that it would also screw up a lot of marketing, because, like I said, all of a sudden this cute cuddly bunny has become, like I said, Satan. You know, but I'm just saying that I think it's just like with Boba Fett, just like with Din, figuring out that there are complexities with Mandalorians. There's complexities with this character of Baby Yoda, that he is not just the harmless, fun-loving child who wants to play with the ball. He's, you know, can rip your head off.
and that's fair because we've seen that with every Jedi pretty much on film or even in print. They all have a weakness about them, the capacity for turning to evil, and that's always there.
And to be fair, he hasn't been training and hasn't been, you know,
Mhm.
keeping up with his, you know, Jedi-ness for 25 years, you know, so we got that from the last episode. So he's just reacting on emotion and on instinct. Yeah, absolutely. But my main point though is that I think we're seeing that he's not, like I said, these aren't just accidents that he's doing. He's he is making choices as a character to do certain things. And he's one powerful little dude. So, but he
Right.
gets, I mean, do you think it's because, why does he get like sleepy after doing, is just because he's out of practice? Is it like me not running for 3 months and then trying to run, 2 miles and I need a nap afterwards? Or is there something bigger going on? And I also want to say Moff Gideon says, you're getting better at that stuff. That was kind of an
Yeah.
interesting throw line there that he had in there. You're getting better at that. Meaning, it almost seemed to me like Moff Gideon has seen him do this before.
Well, part of me wonders if how much of the force he tapped into while on the run being hidden. Because it would strike me that given that he's still very young, relatively speaking, for his species, he's still reacting very much as a kid. By which I mean, we saw him in the episode where the Mandalorian went in Navarro and they went to break into that little secret lab. How he casually used the Force to get the blue macaroons from the other kid. I wonder if he was as cavalier with his use of it beforehand, or if he was being cautious about even reaching into the Force to do anything. It could very well be something where it's like a bike, it takes you a while to get the hang of it if you haven't done it for 15, 20 years.
I think, like, playing off of one thing you just said, Aaron, too, which is like, have they seen him do this before? Well, yes, clearly they had him under wraps the first time Din delivered him. But it makes me curious, did they previously have him in their possession?
That's my point. That's what I'm wondering. Yeah.
Like, even before this episode or this series even began. Because the very beginning of episode 1, Din's goal is, bring us this child. Well, why did they want him so much in the first place? Did they already know? Had they already captured him previously, interacted with him?
Look, it's interesting because, first of all, Werner Herzog, the client, knows who he is or knows what he's sending him after. Dr. Pershing, who gets name dropped in this episode again, knows exactly who and what he is. So there's some awareness of what the child is in some regards from these two characters who are serving Moff Gideon. And then, which brings back the other commandment from other order from the client was, you bring him back to us or you kill him. Like, we either get it or nobody gets it. So it makes me wonder, in those 20 some odd years after the Jedi Temple fell and he went and things went dark, again, air quotes, on the visual media, if he had been he had runnings with multiple factions or multiple people who are all after him. Because right now, all we know that the only group we know for certain is after him is the Empire or the remnant of the Empire being commanded by Moff Gideon. There might be others. We just haven't met them yet.
So Dave, would it be acceptable for Grogu to be the one who kills Moff Gideon at the end of a season somewhere? Because another line I found it really interesting was that when Gideon is teasing him, saying, "Have you seen one of these?" and he has the darksaber out, he's like, "Oh no, you don't want to play with this. You'll hurt yourself." If this was an action movie, then that would be, Baby Yoda throwing a lightsaber into Gideon's chest and saying, "Oh, yeah, you mean like that?" type of thing. Anyway, I'm just speculating and having fun, but Baby Yoda figure with, force action throwing darksaber into Moff Gideon's chest.
And I'll transition us briefly into back to your topic of who was he trying to talk to, if anybody. I have a theory that it might have been not entirely altruistic of Ahsoka to send our characters to Tython in the first place. I think she's trying to find Ezra, as we understand it, per the end of Rebels and the Thrawn name drop and everything else. So sending the child to a broadcast point to bring other Jedi kind of out of the woodwork, like Ezra, might have been her end game more so than just trying to find a home for this child.
But then why wouldn't I get your point, but then why wouldn't she just go there if that was a place where she could, get on, a party line with all the Jedi around, um,
Yeah, you could write that in easily enough. She
I'm ju-
doesn't have the same sort of connection that she knows that Grogu does to, broadcast force or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I
Makes
don't
me
know.
makes me wonder if such an effort it takes a lot out of you. Maybe
Mhm.
Ahsoka didn't think she could do it on her own and leave herself exposed to whoever came calling, whereas she may have better trust in Baby Yoda doing it because his connection to the Force might be stronger than hers. Whereas he also has the Mandalorian to protect him.
Actually, my other bullet point in here was it, and my comment's going to lead to that. I think it's probably more along the lines of what he was there to do in the first place, was just to figure out what his path is supposed to be, and basically to get a blessing to say, I don't want to do this Jedi stuff. I want to go off with this guy who's my dad, who's become my dad. Because I mean, the father son theme is like always been strong in Star Wars, and now it's all over the place because you have, she said, Ahsoka said, you are, you know, she basically said you're like a father to him, didn't she? Or am I making that up? I mean, a big connection anyway. You got Boba Fett talking about, his father Django. Um, of course, you have Din, we saw him being, his father being, killed in front of him, basically. Um, so I really think that it's probably more the simpler path of he's just wanting it's just praying to the Jedi, saying, somebody please just tell me that it's okay for me not to do this Jedi stuff and to go off with this guy. He's looking for a blessing, basically. um I don't know.
Well, and circling back to the point I was making, I'm not trying to say that Ahsoka's secretly evil or something
No.
crazy like that. I'm saying more of a perspective of two
No,
birds, one
that's the
stone.
title. That's the title of this podcast episode now. Ahsoka, evil? Question mark. And that will get all the clicks. Okay.
Let's get the clicks. But I feel like it might have been a two birds, one stone kind of situation from her perspective. You're asking why wouldn't she do it herself? Well, they are trying to find a place for the child and trying to figure out his future. But while he's at it, let's just send this message out into space and see what turns out. I'm just thinking it may not have been entirely altruistic on her part, but back to the point of him and this idea of parental relationships. I think it's really interesting that Boba, Din, and Grogu are all parentless. And I don't know, that may just be a coincidence with how things are lining
they're all
up right now.
foundlings. Yeah.
I mean, we talk about this rhyming and echoing in Star Wars. It's an effective way of telling a story because you can bounce different variations of a character off of your character to sort of emphasize what's good or interesting about them. And I think in this case, it's clearly. I think Boba's clearly going to be a really important character going forward in this story. They may kill him off in 2 episodes. I don't know, but it will have a major impact.
So, so first of all, to all the nerds out there who heard me misspoke, no, Boba is not a foundling. Django was. I know that, and I will say my transgressions. I'll, confess my transgressions later. But so let's talk about, you said, okay, so maybe Boba Fett killed off in a couple episodes, but maybe not. Remember what one of the stories we talked about earlier, months ago, all the rumors going on that they said basically the second half of this season was setting up everybody's Disney Plus series basically. And one of the rumors that has been thrown around there is that there is going to be a Boba Fett. And it does kind of seem, it's like, okay, so can you see, let me just ask you guys, can you see and would you be into a Disney Plus series that is Boba Fett and Fennec Shan, Tamara Morrison and Ming-Na Wen flying around Slave One, doing whatever it is they're doing? Are they bounty hunters? Are they, going after somebody, I don't know. Now that you have given new life, you've rescued the wretched, maybe it is going to be an episode or a series. Would you be down with that now?
I could see it. I'd be okay with it. I think what's interesting is this. It's we all got told that, oh, because of various behind the scenes issues, the second half of this season, I'm sorry, wouldn't have as much Din Djarin. And so far,
He's been
that
there.
hasn't happened. He's front and center. We've had, maybe the episode where Grief Karga and Cara Dune and the Mithril are, running back. There, that was mostly them. But by and large, he's been there. I guess what I would say is it could create a different juxtaposition, given that we established that that character is around. If we want to keep him around, if we want to keep Fennec Shen around, you could have any, eight episode series and just hire the likes of Robert Rodriguez or James Mangold and just tell them, okay, you're making the more PG-13 version of the Mandalorian. If you want to do that. So there's many ways to go about it. They don't, Disney Plus movie, whatever.
I like him in this series. I would like him in a separate series as well. At this point, especially because it's like, okay, a blank slate can be a good thing if you do something interesting with that blank slate, and they're starting to do that with Boba Fett finally, much to everybody's joy and appreciation. So more Boba Fett, I'm all about that. What I'm really curious to see is where still the major storyline, the through line of this season continues to be, is Mando going to embrace fatherhood, right?
Well,
and
he was
I'm really
ready
curious
to leave.
see where that goes.
He was ready to leave. He said the child's gone. I mean,
Yeah.
he was trying to get himself to that place where it's like, but when Boba Fett said, "No, we'll help you," then he's like, "All right, yeah, okay, good." And then they, so it is interesting. He did try to make that choice, because you've mentioned that several weeks, but he did try to make that choice.
He's tried to make the choice to train the kid and step aside, but he's been denied that choice. He was not at a point to embrace fatherhood. He tried to make the choice to give the kid up, and it didn't work out. And so I think it's really, really kind of cool in a way that his failings in letting this father-son relationship develop, maybe more naturally or more quickly, have actually sort of denied Grogu an upbringing more like what he might have experienced as a child, because we know that as a foundling, he was kind of indoctrinated into this strict sect of Mandalorians who had this really narrow, almost fervent sort of approach to life and everything else, in sort of dragging his feet on this decision and getting to a point where, oh, you missed an opportunity, and oh, you may have missed another opportunity. Well, Grogu's not going to be pulled into that kind of a situation now, because like he's not going to be trained as a Jedi. I mean, he may eventually, we may end up there, but for now, it's not happening for him. And so, you can take the parallels between the Jedi Order and this crazy dogmatic version of the Mandalorians that Mando was in. It's really not hard to see that, and you can begin to say, well, the Jedi Order was very flawed and maybe not so good for people as it turned out. Maybe it's a good thing that Grogu would not be folded into being trained as a Jedi, um, and maybe sort of by accident, Mando's providing his son in air quotes, a different experience than he had, and maybe what you might even call a better experience.
So before we get to that better experience, they've got to rescue the little kid. And so this is not one of my theories, but I was listening to the Star Wars Underworld podcast, and they Dominic Jones brought this up, and it was a really good point. You know, we've talked about the Western motif obviously since the beginning of this series. They're kind of setting up a Magnificent Seven type of a thing here, because we're going to have Mando, Boba Fett, Fennec Shan. They're getting Mayfeld. There's probably going to be a Cobb Vanth. You're going to have Cara Dune. You're going to have Chubbs. You know what I mean? You're like all the players are coming in to be, to be this team.
You just listed seven people. You listed seven people.
Yeah.
Yeah. 7 samurai.
Well, but then we got to throw in Bosk. Bosk isn't in yet. Bosk has to come in. They're gonna be next episode. They're gonna be flying somewhere. Where are we going? Oh, I gotta pick up a friend first, and hey, thanks for the ride, man. But no, seriously, that's seems to be kind of where they're going with this.
Well, one of the other major influences on Star Wars has always been the World War II movies of the 50s and 60s, stuff like The Dirty Dozen, Where Eagles Dare, all those kind of action, war films that were prevalent at that time, post World War II. So that's what this feels like. Like, okay, we're going on a mission, and we got to invade the heavily, fortified, impregnable fortress. We got to get our hacker, and we got to get this guy. We got to get an explosives guy. We got to get the.
It might end up being more like the Dirty Dozen, because you got to throw in Bo-Katan in there. Ahsoka's got to probably come in at some point, or maybe she's done for the season. But Bo-Katan wants the Darksaber, so she's going to be involved. But we're setting up a team.
In 1972, a crack commando unit was sent to prison by a military court for a crime they didn't commit.
Yeah, very much so. So it's an interesting point that they're bringing us to, because very much like last season, if you remember, season 1 ended with the child in danger, our hero trapped by Moff Gideon, and them not knowing what they're going to do to get out. And then IG-11 came in riding into town, a whooping and a wumping, and saved them. So I guess this is now the reverse. Now our heroes are going to have to go in and save Baby Yoda, or Grogu in this case, from Moff Gideon.
Aaron, I couldn't help thinking back to your comment from the Ahsoka episode about that Beskar spear, and how once that ship blew up,
the only thing that was left was the little ball and the Beskar spear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I need this plot device. Good, still there.
That's gonna happen.
But here's the biggest mystery of this episode, and of the second season. Here's the biggest mystery. Where do the rockets for Boba Fett's backpack come from? Because Cobb Vanth had one and he used it, And then there's another one all of a sudden when Boba Fett steals the armor back from the Razor Crest. It's like, is this just standard issue? Inquiring minds want to know. But
maybe in the back of the backpack there's like a little containment with like 3 or 4.
so no, it's
You just run into battle with just one rocket.
well, I was, but I don't know. We've never seen where this happens, but anyway, no, it was just kind of funny.
Yeah, you keep the rockets in the diaper bag.
That's right. That's right. No, like I said, this episode, I was pleasantly surprised with it. Here's the other thing, everybody, by the way, because Bill Burr, right? Not Bill Barr, but Bill Burr. Bill Burr denied being in any more Mandalorian, and lo and behold, he's probably going to be in more Mandalorian. So if you read an article where somebody says, no, I'm not gonna be in this show, or no, that's just jokes, or that's just rumors, or nobody's talked to me, they're probably lying through their teeth, called an NDA. So, I just, when you see an article that says, no, this is not going to happen, might just happen. So, but yeah. And this is also one of the first they're on location filming this, because apparently some hikers videoed part of this episode way back when they were filming it, because they're just kind of wandering around the California, desert and everything, and come up on some stormtroopers, and everything. So that was apparently a spoiler that was out there. So it's kind of funny. But all I know is I want more Slave One. That was good. Well, I think we've exhausted this episode. It was a short episode. 32. We'll find out how long. Do we know how long the next episode is going to be? Anybody seen anything?
Not yet. They haven't said anything for running time nor title.
Usually comes from a German website, I think. So, so anyway, anything else for the good of the order before we say good night?
No, it's going to be an interesting ride to the finish now, because we have this episode, then the finale of the season next week, right before we get to the holidays. So, Merry Christmas, kids. You might hopefully don't leave with a bad cliffhanger.
One last thing I'll say, to Aaron, to the point you were talking about, when people have to, the actors and so forth, have to deny involvement and everything else. Shelby Young, a voice actor, came out this week and admitted that she has voiced several characters that made appearances in this show. I think that's noteworthy because she has played Princess Leia before. So just putting that out there.
So maybe Grogu was talking to Leia. Could be.
Possible.
You never know. Which actually, and I don't want to belabor the things more, it would make more sense for that. Or, because I've seen some people say you could even have Mark Hamill do a voice, and it could be like a force projection type of a thing that would be kind of blurry. So, it wouldn't have to be, 1989 Mark Hamill de-aged, but there are things you could do, and that even, Princess Leia, if you had a voice actor, because you don't need to see a person, you just need to hear a voice and go, oh my God, he's talking to Leia. Ewan McGregor, those things, that all makes a little bit more sense than if you were to bring in Ezra all of a sudden. And I'm just within the timeline, but that's something that Dave Filoni needs to resolve at some point. And I think we all are like, okay, well, you got Ahsoka and you got Thrawn, so throw in Ezra, and I agree with that. But I wouldn't put it past just use a voice actor for, a Leia cameo. So,
We'll see.
I mean, again, all these characters are out there doing their thing, but we know they share connections through the Force. So, Grogu grabbing the bullhorn and going, "Hey, I'm here." You have no idea who he might be calling, both light side and dark.
I still got $5 on Force Ghost Obi-Wan.
Cheers.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right. Well, cool. You guys everybody have a great week. Oh, Dave, tell people how they can get us.
Yes, you can listen to us on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn and Alexa, Amazon Music and Audible, and you can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook.
Cool. And until then, till next week, I suppose. And remember, Friday, 24 hours before you post anything about the Mandalorian. But otherwise, if you need me, I'll be on MySpace. But until then, we will all say who dat.
Who dat?
Have a great week, everybody.
McClunky.